Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba. We are back. And as ever, I'm joined by my colleague Steve Wyss. It's a Euro 2020 sort of, we've had a little bit of a break for Euro 2020. We decided to sort of go under the radar a bit. We had a special guest interview with Ashley Coffey of AFC F-Skills student on the last episode. We're closing in on a bit of a landmark coming up soon, aren't we, Steve, which you may briefly mention. But before we get into that, how are you, my friend? Long time no see.
Yeah, I'm well. It's been good, thanks. And you're totally right, Jonathan. That the Euros it kind of takes over a bit, doesn't it? Whether you intend it to or not. You know, especially when it's the group stages. It you kind of if you're into football, it can consume your life a little bit. And I think we're always going to probably were staying under the radar a little bit for a couple of weeks, weren't we? A little bit longer, but it's good to be back. Allsvenskan's returning very soon. Eliteserien has been going on regularly whilst these Euros are on, fitting in these midweek rounds and getting the games done they need to. But yeah, I'm keeping well. I hope you're doing excellent yourself.
Very well, very well. I will not say it's coming home, but it is coming home. We are going to talk about Euro 2020 in part 2. Obviously, we're recording this just after the Sweden v Ukraine game. We will talk about Sweden, give a bit of an overview on it, and also maybe talk about one or two other big teams in this tournament. England, and maybe even touch on Denmark. Why not, as a fellow Scandinavian in the quarterfinals? But sadly for Sweden, their time in this tournament has come to an end. I will not even begin to talk about Norway in this tournament because, as we know, they aren't there. But maybe the World Cup. You never know, Steve. Maybe the World Cup. But yeah, what we're going to do on this episode is we're going to get back into league action. The Eliteserien has been continuing during the last few weeks of the Euro 2020. It's one of the only leagues, really, I think, around Europe that's still ongoing during the tournament. So plenty to catch up in Norway, and that is where we're going to start in part 1, catching up with everything in the Eliteserien. Steve is the man for that. He's been bringing you some expert previews and analysis on his own website, meatmansoccer.com, I think it is. It's Meatman, isn't it? And then in part 2, we will talk about the Euros, and we'll briefly talk about Allsvenskan, because this weekend Allsvenskan is returning. It's a good time, you might say, for Sweden to go out because it's just before the start of the league campaign resuming. We'll preview some of the games and just tell you what's been the latest in Allsvenskan. So let's get into it, Steve. I'm going to, put you on the spot and just say, what's been going on in Eliteserien? Because for those who've maybe dipped out, we haven't really talked about this Eliteserien much in the last few weeks, of course, being away and everything. Where are we in the league at the moment, this moment in time? Fill us in.
Well, I think if anyone looked at the table, you would presume we're in some sort of like MLS league where there's a random number of games played by different sides. We've got some teams as low as 7 games. Fadugba have played 11. There's a few teams on 10, a few on 9, a few on 8. So it's all to do that start of the season where there was like some teams didn't play, others didn't. And I don't think it's going to be till like round 16 until like everyone's going to be having played the same number of games again. So it's a bit, the table can be misconstrued a bit because, there's teams with games in hand, whichever way or the other. But significantly, at the top of the table, we've got Fadugba and Molde on 23 points each. Molde do have a game in hand. Then there is a gap, a 7-point gap down to the likes of Vålerenga, Kristiansand, Viking are lurking. Down at the bottom, Brann only have 4 points on the board from 10 games. Which is rather worrying. But yeah, there's been a lot of games on recently, a few surprises here and there, plenty of action, and it's been good to see the crowds have also been coming back in Norway. At least 2,000 fans are now allowed everywhere, up to 5,000 in some venues. So it's been really good to get some of the fans back, and I think it's all going in a positive direction for the Norwegian league. And of course, soon we're going to be getting teams in European qualifiers, which is for me always one of the most exciting times of the year.
Fantastic stuff. And yeah, looking at the table now, for anyone who's not aware, of course, in third place we currently have Vålerenga with 16 points from 10 games played. We have 2 teams joint top, don't we, at the moment? We've got Molde, 23 points, 10 games played in second. And then we've got Fadugba, 23 points, 11 games played. So Molde with a game in hand, and Fadugba with a +1 goal difference, +15 versus +14. So league is taking shape. And I think the last time we talked about Eliteserien, Steve, I think the title of the episode was Brann at bottom. And as I look down at the bottom of the table, I still see Brann bottom. 4 points from 10 games played. That is something I'm sure we will talk about. A massive story, I'm sure, on that one. We're going to start with a key result that's probably defined the league so far this season, hasn't it? I would say. We've had a big shock. Well, was it a big shock? Bodø/Glimt's unbeaten run ended, didn't it? It's been a long unbeaten run, which you'll tell us about. But a shock, or a couple of shocks in recent weeks. But the most recent one was losing at home to Molde, Steve. So, I mean, they've played 3 games in 7 days, Bodø/Glimt. They drew at Vålerenga 1-1. Then they lost at home to Molde, and they've just come back and beating Stabæk 4-1 in their most recent game on the 27th of June. Their next game is going to be played, I think by the time you listen to this podcast, it will probably have already been played. They're playing Sandefjord. But how are the champions looking this season? You know, are they still have that air of invincibility? I mean, Molde look to be on their necks at this moment in time, breathing down their necks. What have you made of the champions, you know, as we sort of hit the kind of 33% mark of this season?
I think they got some problems, Jonathan, to be honest, because suddenly, for the first time in probably, the last season and a half, injuries might affect them. And they've recently had the bad news that Sondre Sørli is ruled out for the rest of the season with a cruciate ligament injury picked up against Stabæk.
Wow.
And, they were 4-0 up at half-time against Stabæk, by the way, and the manager made, I do believe, 3 substitutions at half-time. But sadly, for Sørli's point of view, he wasn't one of those taken off. If he had been taken off, this wouldn't have happened. So, I mean, to do your cruciate ligament in when you're 4-0 up, that's how frustrating is that? But he's done for the rest of the season, and he's had quite a good year, actually. He's done better than I thought he would. You know, he's not in the same league as like Zinkernagel or against Petter Høge or anything, but he's had a solid year. To make matters worse, Ola Solbakken got injured during the Molde game. He dislocated his shoulder. Might need to be operated on. They don't know yet. He's facing significant time on the sideline. So suddenly their 2 wingers are ruled out. The depth is finally going to be tested for Bodø/Glimt in the attacking areas. That they've hardly had an injury in this area for, you know, the last 12 months, the last sort of 40-odd games. So it's going to be a test. And they've had some problems at centre-back injury-wise as well, with Breda Moe and Marius Loader injured. But I like what I see from Bodø/Glimt at home. They generally are playing pretty good football at home. I worry for them away. They seem to lack it on the road this year. They just don't seem to have the same sort of zest and spark and dominance on the road. And as for the Molde game itself, it kind of threw me back. I expected a wild encounter. Usually the meetings between the 2 teams are really end-to-end, full of goals. And, you know, both teams are there a tango, really. But what changed this time is Molde decided to come with a completely different mentality. They came with a mentality that they use in European matches away from home. And in simple terms, in Molde terms, they park the bus, which I've never seen them do it ever since Erling Moe took over at the club. I've never seen him do it in a domestic game. But I think it was almost a compliment to Bodø/Glimt, but he gave him so much respect that he basically came there to not shit house a result, but focused on defence to make sure he didn't lose. And it was ultimately a system that worked. But it was shocking to see Molde do that in an Eliteserien game. It's just not their style.
Not their style, indeed. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's really, really tragic, isn't it, for Bodø/Glimt, the injuries they faced. And as you say, especially in such a, you know, circumstances where the game is almost done already and dusted. Has there been much talk about, you know, the transfer? I mean, the summer's coming up. We've got the transfer window potentially. Has there been much talk of Bodø/Glimt maybe dipping in for replacements? Because they didn't sort of go crazy, did they, after winning the league this season with the transfers? You know, do they have anything in the kitty? They got some money, haven't they, to spend potentially with some of the sales they've made? Players like, you know, Jens Petter Hauge and players like that. Are we looking at potential replacements? I mean, I'm looking at some of the players who've done quite well this season. You've got players like OE have done quite well, haven't they? Musha Bakenga's doing quite well. There's other players that you could potentially name, you know, who are sort of ranking highly for maybe goals or expected goals or assists. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and I think the bigger concern for them is that the left back, Fredrik Andre Bjørkan, who's been linked with a move away from the club for the past 2 years, really, it's inevitable at some point he will go. And, you know, I was thinking more towards probably the end of this season, but it might be fast-tracked to the summer with, teams sniffing. And, he's going to probably go away for about maybe a couple of £1 million, which seems quite cheap, but that's a lot of money for Norwegian teams. And look, they've signed some good players. Surly was a good signing, for example. Eric Botheim's come in and done well. I think, they've got youngsters going through defence like Sigurd Kavir and Axel Lindahl's not been a bad signing. The Brazilian on loan from Lviv, Pernambuco, there's minutes in him. He's actually injured as well now. I think it's a more minor problem. Maybe he can come and do well. Lasse Nordas was a 19-year-old that scored for them against Stabæk. He filled in for Solbakken. And so I think they've always focused on the recruitment is less on sort of bigger names. It's youngsters they bring in and nurture themselves. But they may have to perhaps go into the market now and get a couple of more established players, especially as they've had a guy ruled out for the whole season. But yeah, there's resources there for Bodø/Glimt. It's going to be a test for them, for sure. At the minute, I'm thinking I don't think they are going to retain the gold medal because of these injuries, and Molde's squad depth is so strong. But a couple of signings here and there, you never know.
Very interesting stuff. And, we'll move on to the next topic. It looks like Bodø/Glimt are looking okay. Rosenborg, now obviously a big giant of this league. We talked about them a lot, a big season for them. They've got a lot to do. We've discussed kind of their transfer moves and things like that. When you look at the table, though, Steve, 10 games played and they're sixth. They're behind Viking. They're even behind Kristiansund, who have a game in hand, which I'm quite surprised about. I have to say I'm starting to take a warming to Kristiansund. It's been growing. It's like a sort of slow burning affection with Kristiansund over the years. Gradually seem to be getting better and better, don't they? Now fourth in the league with 16 points. But Rosenborg, 10 games played, 4 wins, 2 draws, 4 defeats. 16 goals conceded as well in 10 games, and had a bit of a poor run, haven't they? 3 defeats in a row. What's going on there with Rosenborg?
Well, it seems all sorts is going wrong now, but you mentioned the 16 goals conceded, 1 clean sheet all season. I just don't think you can live off that, can you? If you can continually conceding goals. I thought everything was going pretty, not smoothly for them, but they'd had a bit of rub of the green in a number of games, some late goals, things like that. But I kind of felt like they were getting some momentum back, really, Jonathan. But then they've since hit the buffers. There was the international break where and they come back from that. They lost at Godset. It was a 50-50 game. It could have gone either way. And they lost against Sarpsborg. And then just to add insult to injury, they lost against Lillestrøm on Monday. And the 2 goals that Lillestrøm scored, one was Paul Andre Helland, who they let go at the end of last season. He scored a goal and he loved it. He said that the scoring a goal against his old club was up there with the birth of his children in terms of feelings. And he's something like there was never any question about celebrating. He'd planned it and everything. He gave it proper large. This is a guy that's won plenty of gold medals with Rosenborg. He's still quite respected up there. But he wasn't happy about how he was let go, I don't think, by, Argo Harida. I think Harida basically said, you finished here now. We don't really see a future for you. Lillestrøm took him on. Anyway, he scored his goal. Typical Paul Andre Helland fashion. He got injured after 19 minutes. He's the most injury-prone player ever that I've known since covering this league. Got injured after 19 minutes. Went off to a hero's welcome. The crowd chanting his name. And then just at the end of the game, Yermund Assen scored the second goal. He's on loan from Rosenborg, so he scored against his own club. So, what a way to lose. You basically, the 2 goals that you conceded against cast-offs that you've basically disregarded, and that just sums Rosenborg up at the minute. On the field, there's problems. There's issues off the field, which we're going to talk about soon as well. Suddenly, they're on a nosedive again. And, at the time of recording, they're playing tomorrow against Haugesund at home. A big game for them, and he'll get back on track.
Yeah, and there's the goal was fantastic, wasn't it? And to be honest, bit of a dodgy keeping from Hansen, I think. Looking at the goal there, maybe could have done better. But yeah, the scenes were quite lively, weren't they? Lillestrøm were a team who, you did sort of talk up in the preseason show. You did say that you thought they could do 1 or 2 things this season, could sort of turn a few heads, and that's quite a big win for them, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm pleased for Lillestrøm that they it was a great atmosphere at Larsen Stadium. on Monday, and 2,000 fans allowed back in. The crowd were loving it. They were absolutely loving it, Jonathan, and they were going berserk. This is a huge result for Lillestrøm. It's historically pretty big club in the league. They've won 4 of the last 5 now, and they look up for it. And I think they had a bit of a dodgy start, but they may now finally live up to my dark horse tag and prove me right. I think Lillestrøm, they seem to be going places, so I'm pleased for them. I am. I know sometimes people think I don't like Lillestrøm on this podcast, but I've never had anything against them.
Yeah, and for those who are enjoying fantasy football, Assen, Guillermo Assen was pretty effective in that game, wasn't he? 1 goal, 1 assist. He also picked up 3 bonus fantasy points. I will quickly ask you, Steve, how are you getting on in the fantasy?
Well, I will say this: I had the Lillestrøm goalkeeper on my team sheet for that game, and he picked up 9 points. So I also had a Lillestrøm defender on the bench, which didn't help me. Got 8 points. But my overall fantasy season has not been going as well as I would want this year. I've got Sondre Surly in my team. He's going to have to go out now, isn't he? Solbakken as well. It's like everything that can go wrong is going wrong for me in fantasy this year. It's just not my season in fantasy, I don't think.
No, and to be precise, for anyone who's listening and maybe wondering, you're currently in 66th place, which is in a sort of a roughly 100-team league.
I'm 9,184th overall, which for me is pretty damn low for someone. I've been finishing in the top. Let me look at my previous years. I've been in the top 600 every single year for the last 3 years. So overall,
yeah, the mighty have fallen in this one. It looks like it's a sort of Chelsea in 2015 sort of type season for you, isn't it? 2016 season when Mourinho.
I can still recover it. I
but,
can still come back.
Let's. I mean, I won't talk where I am. I'm firmly relegation zone. But for those who are listening, just to give a recap, we've got Rasmus Andersen in 5th, FPL Rasmus, 602 points. This is in the Nordic Football Podcast League, by the way, private mini league. We've got Juveline United, Emil Magnus Jacobsen, 603 points, 4th place. We've got Kalrabi Kamaretana, Vigard Bjorga, I think, 605 points, very close. So 3rd place. We've got JS. He's always up there, isn't he? OCD All-Stars.
Always up there.
He's down. He's been knocked down. 616 points. He's down this week, though. And at the top, it would be rude not to, average at FPL with a storming week, 95 points. And he is now got 632. And he is top of the Nordic Football Podcast Mini League. He played 2 captains this week. And it's part of the reason he's done so well. Botheim and Saltness, I think, pretty well for him.
You can join this league. I just wanted sorry, Jonathan, that you can join this league if you've not joined it before. Join the code is EV lowercase 70 I lowercase 0. So you can still join this Nordic Football Podcast Fantasy League.
Yep, the league's still open to join, so get involved. And I'm pretty sure if you haven't even joined yet, give it a few weeks and you'll probably be above me at this rate. But let's move on. And there's been a bit of controversy in Eliteserien in Norway, haven't there, recently with Rosenborg? I mean, we talked about them on the pitch, 4 defeats in the last 6 games, 3 in a row. But off the pitch, there's been some sort of unseemly kind of events, haven't there, Steve, at the moment?
Yeah, this all revolves around the manager, Arga Horida, who basically was asked questions about the UEFA decision. When Munich wanted to light up the Allianz Arena in the rainbow colours, the pride colours, and he was asked about what he thought about that, and he came out by saying that he believes that sport should be completely clean of anything politically related or along those lines. And I think it's something that hasn't come across particularly well in this day and age, because I think a lot of people now see football as this vector for it's so watched, isn't it? And there's so much worldwide coverage of it. It is a way you can use ways to really increase positivity in life, and sort of make a mark in a good way. And I don't think the reaction was not very good to Herida, and it was so much so that Rosenborg themselves actually came out. They were forced to come out with their own statement on their official website saying Rosenborg supports Pride. Our manager, August Herida, stated earlier today that Pride and other celebrations do not belong in the football arena. It has created reactions. This is August's opinion and not the club's point of view. And, you know, for a club to have to force them to come out to say that just shows you, you know, of the negative reactions. It goes on to say a couple of things that Arga Herida said in support of things like that, but it basically feels like something they're trying to brush under the carpet a bit. And not a good look. It's not good for PR. It's not good for a lot of things, really, I don't think, Jonathan. And to be honest, I don't really see what he would have against this. It's a very peaceful movement. And
well, he's come out and said that. I mean, I think the word that has offended people, really, that's upset people, isn't it? Is he described it as propaganda.
Yeah,
in the parade, and I think that's the key word really that's upset some people. I mean, just reading some of the comments, as you've said there, and you've explained it quite well. I mean, I think the key thing is he said pride is in many ways a propaganda for people to love each other. That's okay, but do not use the sport for that, he said. And I think although he's clarified it a little bit. And he has said that, you know, he didn't mean it in the way it's maybe been interpreted. I think the word propaganda is the one that's upset people, hasn't it? I mean, there's been some, you know, sports commentator in Andres Avisen, Berger Lofadli said this is a troubling case for Rosenborg, and you know, there's also been talk about his contract is being renegotiated, isn't it? It's not a great time for him to be making comments, isn't it? I understand his contract will be renegotiated on July the 1st, and Lofaldi has said they're in the middle of a process where they must consider whether to extend the contract with Herida. I think this could play into such a case. Do you think, Steve, that this could actually affect maybe him keeping his job, or is it the results on the pitch? You know, have they been going poorly? Because, you know, you were quite positive about Rosenborg, but it seems to have not gone that well so far this season. Where are you sitting on that, you know, decision of him renewing his contract? Do you think this could actually affect it, what he said?
Yeah, I think he came into the club at a difficult time after the Erik Horneland debacle. Just didn't work out with Horneland. He had a bit of a mess to clear up, and you know, you can't knock his experience. He's won a lot of things in the past, but sometimes you've got to move on, haven't you, to sort of a new generation. You could say maybe they try to do that with Horneland a bit, to be fair, but I just sense this could be the first of a bit of a setback in terms for Rosenborg. I do wonder whether there will be a new contract for him going forward. Like you said, results have suddenly turned a bit. Then now there's this. I mean, it's the last thing that I'm convinced this had a factor in the Lillestrøm game. Like, there's no way them players want this sort of controversy hanging over them. It just adds unnecessary pressure, doesn't it? So I think if a combination of things may lead to them not renewing his contract. And I really think it's a terrible look. I think I said something on my own Twitter account about this, and I dare not repeat the words because I really was not impressed with what I heard from the manager. I'm fully behind all these anything Pride related movement. I think I was disappointed. I was very disappointed in it, and I think a combination of things may lead to them going in a different direction in the future.
Yeah, it's fascinating how sometimes, you know, I mean, ironically, he's kind of proved himself to be wrong, hasn't he? Because he said that politics and sport are completely separate, and by saying that, he's actually maybe he may be losing his job. You know, so he's almost proved himself wrong, hasn't he? Really, in quite a swift fashion. So, of course, you know, it's an interesting debate, isn't it? And it kind of proves that sport is intertwined with society, really, and it kind of always will be, really. And people who say it isn't is kind of sometimes maybe missing the point a little bit. But I do understand the intentions. He has tried to clarify them. Let's see if it impacts their decision to whether to keep him or not. It's probably not the best timing, is it, as well, especially with such poor results. I mean, just looking at the some of the stats that may interest our listeners who are more of a, you know, statistically analysing the league. In terms of expected goals against, Steve, Rosenborg were the third worst team in the league. I mean, their expected goals against is 18.42. Only two teams have a higher XG against, and that's Stabæk and Brann. Stabæk 20.56, Brann 18.95. So, you know, it's relegation form in terms of the amount of goals they're expected to concede, and you know, ultimately that's not going to help his case either, is it? Really, when it comes to these kind of decisions. So it's looking like a tough time, really, for Rosenborg at this moment in time. Let's move on. I mean, in fairness to them, just before I do wrap that up, they have had the second highest number of shots in the league, behind Buda. So, you know, they are obviously creating chances. They have the fourth most touches in the penalty area, behind Molde, Vålerenga, and Buda. So, one or two reasons to be positive. You know, I don't want to be completely negative on Harada, but yeah, it seems like defensively they are kind of struggling. But let's move on anyway. It's an interesting debate as always there, Steve. Thank you. The next topic we're going to talk about is, well, it's Branner time, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's time to talk about how flaky Branner, complete misery really for them, isn't it? I mean, bottom of the league when we talked last time, bottom of the league now, 8 out of 10 defeats. Steve, what have you got to say about Brann? I mean, nothing's really changed, has it?
It's when you have a brutal run of fixtures, it can really set you back. And Stabæk is similar. I think we're going to talk a little bit about Stabæk after this.
I mean, they've had one win all season. I'm just looking
at
the table. 1 win in 10. I mean, that is scandalous.
If you look at the first 5 games, you could say you would almost not expect them to lose the first 5, but they're bloody tough games. And I think you just set them on the back foot. But I sensed something had changed. They beat Strømsgodset 3-0. They got a good draw against Sarpsborg. They suddenly looked solid again. Then they got a match at home against Odd where 5,000 fans were allowed in. And you're thinking, hey, they can really kick on here. But I've got to be honest, I think they put up a bit of a stinker of a performance against Odd. They lost it 3-1. And just when you're down there, that sort of result can kick you back straight away. If you're vulnerable, your confidence is low. And then they gone and lost against Haugesund 1-0. And they probably shouldn't have lost the game. It was probably a deserved draw. But look, an old gambling pro I used to know had a saying, bad things happen to bad teams. And that's what's been happening to Brann recently. They're finding ways to lose games, Jonathan. And that is just not a good sign. And that's what happened against Haugesund. There's been other examples earlier in the year. And you just don't have much confidence in them. You could almost see them in the next game sort of dominating, playing well, yet finding a way to somehow cock up points. And it's a concerning period. They need to get some wins on the board. Remember, they've played 10 games, more than most other sides. That's another concern, isn't it? The manager's under pressure. And yeah, it is not a good time to be a Brann fan.
Yeah, certainly not. It's a good time to be a Brann fan. And, I mean, there's some interesting quirks in this league. I'm just looking at, Mjøndalen, we're not going to talk about them today, I don't think, but could be one for a pod later on, Steve, because a very interesting statistical quirk there as well. And this is brought to you by our partners, Y-Scout. And always, as I say, thanks to Y-Scout for the partnership. Top of the league in terms of expected goals against, so the best record for XG against in the league is Mjøndalen's. And bottom of the league for expected goals is Mjøndalen. So they're keeping it extremely tight, aren't they, in terms of XG against, but they're not creating at all. I mean, I know we're talking about Brann, but that is something I'm just looking at sort of the statistics in this league. And Mjøndalen, the 13th, one of the teams that, we did maybe expect to struggle this season, didn't we? Certainly you've got them 15th this season, Steve. So they're above Brann, who you've got in 8th. I mean, how serious is this for Brann? Is this critical? Do they have the ability to maybe dip into the transfer market? Do they need to, in your opinion? And I don't know if you want to have a word from Mjøndalen, but maybe we'll save them for another week. But I just found that very, very interesting at this stage of the season. But how serious is this for Brann? Because they're a massive club, aren't they, in Norway? And it's all gone Pete Tong for them.
It has. They've got a new sports manager, Jimmy Jakobsen, and he basically is now started working at the club. There was a piece on their website actually that I read I think today, in fact, and he was even asked a question about the reinforcements. The transfer window opens on the 1st of August, and he said, "I will make sure that we are best prepared to know what opportunities lie there for us in the areas we want to strengthen." And then the questions asked him, "Are there financial opportunities to get reinforcements?" And he said, "Yes, we have the opportunity to do so. We will do a thorough job of finding the types that may be the right solutions for us." So then he also goes on to say, "Nevertheless, the most important thing is to further develop what we already have and make sure we get the best out of the current group." So it looks like they're already planning on raiding the transfer market in transfer window in August. and it looks like there is some money there to pump into them. The manager's an interesting situation, Codder Brixton. I don't think they would have gone into the season wanting to even think about sacking him, but they've got the next few games are winnable. You actually look at their next sort of 10 fixtures, and there's winnable games in there. Lillestrøm tomorrow, they've got Kristiansund, and 3 home games in a row against Tromsø, Mjøndalen and Sandefjord. These are chances to get points out of this. So I think they'll probably give him till the halfway stage of the season. Probably more to the 18th of July, and then there's about a month break. So he'd probably give him another 4 games and see what points they're on. But yeah, of course, it's getting critical when you're on this amount of less points. But they do have some winnable games coming up soon, which is a positive for Brann.
Yeah, and I have to say, looking at the goal, from Wadji, the winner for Haugesund, 2 points there, really. Number one, it's fantastic to see fans back, isn't it? They made a real noise when the goal went in.
Yeah.
But secondly, the defending is there's a total joke from Brann, isn't it? Really, 2 players basically have broken through the line of 6 players. 6 Brann defenders. One player's broken through the Brann midfield, taking out 3 players, and then Wadji's taken out 3 players in defence himself. So a really shocking goal, isn't it? Really, and I guess that sums up Brann's problems at the moment. But if we look at Haugesund, I just want to, before we move on, say a goodbye, isn't it? Because someone who's been sort of popping up in this podcast for quite a few years now, hasn't he? He's leaving the league. It's my man, Bruno Leite. It's probably the only thing I know about Haugesund, but I do know a little bit about him. I caught him in a few games, and I've always liked him, Steve. And there's been some transfer news, isn't there? He is leaving, and he only came off the bench for 18 minutes, but it will be his last game for Haugesund, isn't it? I think, pretty much. Yeah,
I think there was a time when you probably knew more about Haugesund than I did. With your religious following of this player, I don't know how many games he's played for them. I'm just going to check it up actually now, but he's been there a fair while at Haugesund. He had a couple of seasons where he did cement himself in there. I think it's 119 games off the top of my head. Yeah, 119 games, 4 goals, 7 assists. And, there was, a couple of campaigns where he did cement himself as a main starter, but, he's been a bit more sort of benched under the current manager, and I get why he might want to move on. But, yeah, a loyal servant to Haugesund, and they're a small squad there, so I'm sure they'll miss him as well. I was pleased for them that they got the win, and that the crowd, like you said, they went absolutely bonkers, didn't it, when Wadji scored the goal? This is a local derby, you've got to remember as well. And it was a real tense feeling towards the end of the game. Brann should have equalised right at the death. But, again, poor decision-making from them. Someone went for the shot instead of the pass. And that just sums Brann up right now. But, Bruno Leite, good stint he's had in Eliteserien.
He's off to...
Good luck to him.
He's off to Paphos FC in Cyprus. He had interest apparently from Turkey as well and Belgium, according to local journalists. He caught my eye, I think it was in 2018 or 2019 season. He's just one of those players who I've always kept an eye out for. I like the way he ran in midfield in a couple of games I saw. And I always just thought after that, I'm going to keep my eye on this player. But doesn't seem to have maybe gone on as much as I thought he might. But yeah, still a nice move to sunny Cyprus. And good luck to Bruno Leite. Maybe we'll see him again in Eliteserien in years to come, or maybe Allsvenskan, who knows.
Well, Cyprus is one of them weird places where you can be on a beach in the morning and you can be skiing in the afternoon. Did you know that? I know the ski resorts there, but not a lot of people know about.
I did not know that. Where are you going to ski in Cyprus?
There's some really tall mountains there. I know some people who go there regularly every year, and they're like, I was skiing there in the morning, and I was on the beach in the afternoon in high temperatures.
I have heard it is quite mountainous, actually.
I've never been to Cyprus in my life, so I can't say it firsthand, but it does seem like one of them sort of freak destinations where you can do a bit of everything, So he's going to enjoy that, isn't he?
There you go. The Nordic Football Podcast bringing you not only football analysis, but also, holiday destinations potentially. So always, you can never accuse us of being a vanilla pod. We've got 2 more topics before we wrap up this part of the show. A couple of transfers that you wanted to talk about, including the Dutch. The Dutch are coming, aren't they, for the Norwegian league? I'm trying to think what game it was I saw Bruno Leite, actually. I think it was
a Ian Birchnell game.
Yeah, we did a match analysis, didn't we? I think we did a match analysis in that game. I watched it properly. and I really liked his ball retention. But yeah, it was a good few years ago now. But anyway, it just shows you how you sort of taken a liking to a player sometimes, don't you? He's been in my fantasy team this year as well, by the way, so I'm going to have to get him out because I don't think he's done anything. But yeah, as I mentioned, the Dutch have kind of been raiding the league for one or two players, haven't they, Steve? What have you got to tell us?
Well, Feyenoord are the team that are really raiding Norway, it seems. Holmgren Pedersen, he is confirmed as moving to Feyenoord from Molde. They've been linked with Frederick Andre Björkan and also one of the Kitalanos at Odd. There's so many Kitalanos, I always forget who's who. But yeah, the left back at Odd, John Kitalano, they're linked with him. But I mean, look, I've seen a few teams in France also linked with Björkan, by the way. So, or Zer of all teams actually were, but I think Nîmes were in the running as well. But yeah, it looks like Feyenoord are getting the teeth stuck into Scandinavia, and I can't blame them because you get some good talents up there. So, you know, kudos to them. They're probably my favourite team in Holland. Actually, Feyenoord. I always love their passion. So good luck to Holmgren Pedersen there at De Kuip.
Has he been a good player in the league?
I think I'll be honest with you, I think he's a little bit overrated. And I do not mean to say this in any sort of negative way at all. Because he's no doubt he's got a lot of ability. But look, this is someone who started life at Tromsø as a winger. And I still think there's tendencies when he is this defender to, you know, there's moments of switch off. He likes to get forward a lot. You know, it's a good job. He's so fast physically, he can get back, and any mistake he makes, he can sort of make it up with his pace. And you get players like that, don't you? You know, it's always happened. So he's lucky there. But, you know, I think it'd be interesting to see what sort of system he goes into. I think he'd be perfect in sort of like a wing-back system. You know, he's always played in a 4-3-3 at Molde. Sorry, 4-2-3-1. You know, if he goes into say like a 5-3-2 or 3-5-2, I think that would be his optimum. So I have no idea what Feyenoord play these days, but yeah, as a defender, I still think there's moments where he switches off. But I suppose at Feyenoord they're going to be favourite in every game apart from 4 matches a year, right? So yeah, probably will suit them. I think he's a little bit overrated, and I honestly don't mean that negatively. But there's still he's only 20 years old, so plenty of time to iron it out there.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that, maybe Feyenoord have started looking at AZ Alkmaar because they're the ones who tend to sort of buy from Scandinavia recently, haven't they? They've taken Jesper Karlsson. They took, who was it from Norway that they took from Bodø Glimt? The name escapes me now. But the name escapes me now. But yeah.
AZ Alkmaar?
Yeah.
Yeah, God, I think I'm trying to bloody think myself, but yeah, I know you mean. Yeah, Håkon Evjen.
Yeah, exactly. What happened to him these days? I don't know how he's getting on, but yeah, they took him as well. So maybe Feyenoord have sort of woken up to that and decided to go for Holmgren Pedersen. So good luck to him. The last topic, maybe I'll run a few stats on Holmgren Pedersen to wrap up this part 1. But before I do that, Steve, you wanted to talk about Lars Mahinen.
Yeah, I do. I think obviously, with Michael Stara moved back to IFK Gothenburg, right, in Sweden. So, which I was surprised by that myself. But Sarpsborg had to react, and Sarpsborg are in a position where they're playing this 3-4-3 system, and it's not the sort of system you can just ditch, is it, in sort of the middle of the season. So the Heenan was the perfect guy to come in because he's been using that in his previous jobs. And, basically, things didn't go very well for Lars at Ålesund and in the Eliteserien. But he's got a better squad now here at Sarpsborg. And I'll be honest, I quite like what I've seen so far from him. Unfortunately, I gave him the kiss of death on Monday when I said after the first half against Viking, this is a very watchable team. He's looking good, and then end up losing. In sort of the thing with Mahinen, he said in an interview recently, I said this, he would much rather win 4-3 than 1-0. A bit like a Kevin Keegan thing to say, that, isn't it? And I really like that idea, though. I don't want to see teams win 1-0. I want to see action and goals and excitement, and I think he does as well. And I think that's going to serve Sarpsborg well if he can get the most out of their offensive abilities. Because honestly, Mikkel Stara was sucking the life out of that team. I would never watch them unless I had to. Like, they were such a boring watch, but I think Lars will get a lot more out of them. And they've put in some good performances against Molde and Rosenborg recently. So, yeah, I like what I see. I just hope that he doesn't, blow points like he did at Arlesund. That is a bit of he can sometimes go for broke a bit, which I hope he gets rewarded for that if he has that attitude, because he brings a lot of positivity to football. And I think Salzburg the fans can certainly look forward to some better football with Lars in charge. So far, I like what I see, and all the best to Lars Bohinen.
Fantastic stuff. And just to summarise, you think he'll have a positive impact there? You think, he's going to obviously change the style. The currently, 11th, is it? He's
not going to change the formation. That's the thing. There's so many different ways you can go 3-4-3. As we discussed, we've done an episode. If you want to check on our YouTube channel. There was a really interesting tactical discussion, but he's basically going from the defensive version of it to a more attacking version of it. But that's going to take some time to build in, probably take him to the rest of the season. But if you can just get him into a sort of a solid mid-table position, build, off-season with some players that probably fit his eye better, then I think there's, he's at a club here, a more ambitious club, a bit more resources, and we could finally see this sort of 3-4-3 vision of his really go to fruition if things fall his way.
Fantastic stuff, and that will wrap it up for part 1. Coming up in part 2, we're going to move to Sweden. We're going to briefly talk about the Euros, and we are going to also preview the Allsvenskan return, which is back this weekend. So but before we do that, actually, I'll just read out the fixtures this week, because we probably won't get to them by the time you maybe listen to this pod when it comes out. So I'll just briefly read you the coming fixtures, because they're on Wednesday night. We've got Molde Strømsgodset, Rosenborg Haugesund, Sandefjord Bodø Glimt, Tromsø Kristiansund, Viking Stabæk, Brann Lillestrøm, Mjøndalen v Odd, and Vålerenga v Sarpsborg. So any teams we've missed out on, we will touch on in weeks to come. And don't forget to tweet us at Nordic Footpod if you've got questions and that kind of thing on maybe some of the other teams we haven't talked about this week. But that'll wrap it up for part 1. Join us in part 2, where we will head over to Sweden.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss, and I'm with Jonathan Fadugba. And just before we move now into the Swedish little section, I can reveal that in cricketing terms, we're in the nervous 90s, Jonathan. This is our 97th episode, so we're just 3 away from the century mark. We're doing a bit of a Michael Slater right now. For those who know their cricket, will know that he got out in the 90s an awful lot. But closing in on a century of episodes, my friend. How does that feel?
That means it's going to be sort of nearly well over 100 hours of listening to me drone on, which anyone who's made it through that, fair play to you. It's a good achievement, to be honest. I think there's some statistics, aren't there, that I think only not even 5% of podcasts make it to the 100th episode, something like that. So a testament to our longevity, I would say. But let's get there first. We've still got a few to go. You never know what might happen, mate.
I know.
You might get signed by the cricket podcast or something. So who knows?
That's why I said it is the nervous 90s, isn't it? So but yeah, okay. Well, into this second part of the episode, then, and we are gonna.
No, but one thing I should say, by the way, just that for anyone who has been with us from the beginning, just want to give you a big shout out, because I'm sure we'll talk more about it when we get there. But certainly been an exciting journey, hasn't it? And we have had some loyal listeners. So anyone who remembers from back in the day, then we certainly appreciate you. And I know a lot of you are following us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. So yeah, it's quite nice, isn't it? It's a nice feeling. We're getting there, aren't we, Steve?
We are getting there, and it's been very enjoyable so far, and hopefully plenty more to come in the future. And do you know what? For this particular episode, I actually did a large chunk of my preparation was on a hypothetical matchup. I was getting ready for another Sweden against England preview that we did. We did one in 2018, didn't we, in the World Cup? And to be honest, I was always quietly confident England would beat Germany, and I was very confident that Sweden would get through Ukraine. So, when England got past Germany, I'm like, yeah, I'm ready for this matchup. I'm ready for this preview. And then Ukraine knocked Sweden out at the death. And I'm like, bloody hell, all that preparation for nothing. So Sweden in the Euros, we've got to mention them, really. Obviously, interesting journey they've had. But fundamentally, probably it will be disappointing way that they got knocked out, Jonathan.
Yeah, big disappointment, isn't it, really, in Sweden tonight? Certainly there'll be feelings of regret. Being knocked out to Ukraine, it's happened before. Well, they've lost before. Of course, the last time these two met was in Euro 2012. Sweden, last time they met in a competitive setting in a European tournament, and that was Shevchenko scored twice in that game. Zlatan, I think, scored one as well. It was a 2-1 win. Seb Larsson played in that game, played tonight as well. So he's certainly showed his longevity. We're talking about 100 episodes. He's been around for about 100 years. But yeah, in the end, it was a big opportunity missed. There was a sense of complacency, maybe potentially you could say, in the build-up. Dejan Kulusevski was talking about the route to the final, and it's a bit of an easier draw, he said, and it's a bit of an easier tie to be in. I'm not accusing them of being complacent in any way, but I never like comments like that, saying, talking about the half of the draw and, the teams will be easier and that kind of thing. I always think play the game in front of you. Ukraine were kind of quite fortunate to get through, of course, because they lost to Austria, didn't they? And then based on the sort of fourth, the best third place teams, they managed to make it through because Spain battered Slovakia, and that helped the goal difference and that kind of thing. So they sneaked through Ukraine. But in what Kulusevski did say Ukraine will be an incredibly tough game, in fairness to him, so I'm not getting on his back there. But no, Augustinsson said that, sorry. So I'm not saying that the team got complacent, but it's a big opportunity missed, really, isn't this, for Sweden to get to a quarter final, play England again. Maybe could have been a sense of revenge. I mean, the game did hinge on the red card from Danielson. My timeline on Twitter was massively divided between never a red and absolutely definitely a red. I personally sit on the latter. I think it's definitely a red card. I think if you look at the bend on Bessedy's leg, I mean, if he hasn't broken his leg, he's going to be very lucky, because that looked really, really bad. And I know he won the ball, but I think when your straight leg studs up like that, high on someone's knee, I fail to see how you're not asking for trouble. Even though it was no malice in it, but I think it's still a dangerous challenge, excessive force and all that kind of thing. So yeah, they will have regret. I mean, there's been question marks in this tournament about Jan Andersson and his style of play, a bit like Southgate, in England. There's been talk of is Sweden too defensive, with a sort of 4-4-2 and very compact shape, very sort of low block, two banks of four, and then an attacking midfielder in Forsberg and a striker in Isak. But if you looked at the stats going into this game, I was lucky enough to be invited by Zoria Londonsk, which is a Ukrainian football podcast, to preview this match. So shout out to them. Thanks for having me on this show. But yeah, I mean, when I was previewing Sweden on that podcast, and they were quite scared. Well, not scared, but they were quite worried about Ukraine. They were quite cautious. I had some things to point out. Sweden have been one of the worst teams in terms of passing completion in this tournament. Second worst team in the competition for ball possession. This is up to the end of the group stages. So a team that's really kind of been happy to sit back, really, and not really try to string too much play together, and just kind of relied on individual brilliance from Kulusevski, certainly against Poland, and of course Forsberg, who's done really well this tournament. I think he's really almost rejuvenated his career, because there was a time when he looked like he'd have a really, really big career, and then he kind of went a bit quiet in the last sort of maybe 18 months or so on the club scene at Leipzig, and kind of went off the boil a little bit. So I'm really happy that he's kind of back maybe on the big stage now, and he can maybe continue his career. But yeah, real sense of regret, Steve, tonight. I think in Sweden I think it's a big opportunity lost to at least get to a quarters. Maybe could have even eyed up a semi against Denmark. So yeah, there's a real feeling of bitterness. Seb Larsson's come out tonight and said he was close to tears, and yeah, it's a sad end to the tournament for Sweden.
Yeah, because I mean, I look at this Swedish team on paper, and there's genuine quality in there now. Augustinsson is obviously a very reliable left back. Forsberg, I think, was top quality in this tournament. Isaac, we know what he's about. He's going to get better and better. Kulusevski, this is not a has-been team. This is a better Sweden for me than it was in the World Cup, for example. So, and they're certainly a better team than Ukraine on paper, in my opinion. And maybe the manager, 45% ball possession against Ukraine seems quite low to me, like you were saying there. And the red card, I feel sorry for him a little bit because he was just getting stuck in. And I think there's still images and the slow-mos make it look worse. But I'm afraid in this modern era, you probably can't do that, can you? You're asking for trouble. So I do have sympathy for him, but I think in the 2021 letter of the law, it probably is a red card. But I think a lot of people expected Sweden to win this game because the group stage they had some good results. They played some good football at times, and this is certainly a blow. How hard do you think this will actually hit the national team? Because it feels like they were making progression. Will this be a setback, or can they learn from it?
I think they can learn from it. This generation, I mentioned it in the pod I went on, like I say, this generation came through since 2015, really. There's a lot of players in that squad who won the under-21 Euros in 2015. I was there, covered the tournament for Just Football in Czech Republic. And, if you look at some of the players in that tournament, you got the likes of Augustinsson was in that squad. Many of the players, as I say, were in that squad. So they've added to it with players like Isak, who's come through, and others. Lindelof, of course, was in that squad. So this is a team that's kind of grown together, and I think there's a bit of a theme in this tournament of that because, I know England aren't playing their kind of players who came through from the under-17 World Cup winning squad, the likes of Sancho, of course, and Foden hasn't even had that much game time, but there is that kind of emergence of different sort of generations. Switzerland, for example, in the quarterfinals. Their generation of players that won the under-17 World Cup in 2009 come through. Seferovic, he actually wrote an article about him in 2009, going back on Just Football, very, very long time now, when I was named him one of the players of the tournament at that tournament in 2009. And, I think I likened him to Alan Shearer. And, for quite a long time, I kind of regretted that because he's not really kicked on Seferovic in his career. He's always flattered to deceive because at youth level he was really, really good. But he's just come in now, hasn't he? And he's helped knock out France, and they've got a few other players in that team. Granit Xhaka, Admir Mehmedi, who came on. So each kind of squad who's in these last 8, they kind of have a little bit of a core group of players who've come through youth football, which is always nice to see. And I think Sweden do have that. The question now will be what happens next for that team, because a lot of those players are sort of starting to enter their, mid sort of late 20s maybe. So they've still got enough football in them, surely. Lindelof's not going anywhere, I don't think, for example. Augustinsson, although he has his injuries, he'll still be around. Players like that. But then the next thing that they can build on, really, I think this tournament's been good, I think, to get players like Isak. I think Kulusevski looked really, really good against Poland, like I say. And I thought against Ukraine, he was their main player, really, in terms of creativity, besides Forsberg, who hit the bar and post, and of course scored. So those kind of players, I think they're getting that tournament experience for those young players like Kulusevski, like I say, like Isak. That will help them. Those players can now go to the World Cup maybe and build on it. They're only going to lose maybe a couple of players. Obviously, the World Cup is only a year away, isn't it? It's only 18 months away. So Larson, could he stick around for it? Maybe. There's talk now that he will retire, but potentially he could be around for it. If he wanted to, if he can stay another year. Others maybe can try. So, I think they can look on it and build. I think there will be some criticism for Jan Anderson because the game was there for the taking, in my opinion. And I just think that, he did take off quite a few players in this game where maybe they could have left on like an Isak, maybe. But, the red card is unfortunate. And from his point of view, what can he do about it as a manager? Not much. So, yeah, I think there'll be a feeling of regret, but they can still build on this, I think, and move forward. They don't have, it's not like the last chance for them in any stretch of the imagination. And really, last 16, if you looked at the groups beforehand, maybe that's probably what they'd have expected. Would they have expected to go through? Maybe not. I think the regret for Sweden here is, I think in this group they could have faced Spain, isn't it, in the next round? I think that was one of the possibilities, and I think both sides, Ukraine and Sweden, probably thought they'd have a harder last 16 game. Both of them looked at each other and thought, let's have some of that. Really, considering who they could have got. So I think that's where the regret will come. But all in all, if you'd said to them last 16, it wouldn't have been gone down as a failure, I don't think. But it's just going to be that feeling of regret. The way it's happened.
And I'm a bit gutted, really. It's not going to be Sweden, England again. I was looking forward to it. And, I was ready for it. So, and I think it would have been close. I do. I really think it would have been close. But, before we move on to Allsvenskan, I suppose now you're here, I might as well get your prediction, Jonathan, about who's going to win the tournament now, do you think?
I think it's coming home, Steve. I think England are going to win the tournament. And, it's not me being patriotic or anything like that, but I think everything's falling England's way. I mean, as I said, you look at the Sweden 2015 generation. You got Augustinsson. You got players like, as I say, you got Robin Quaison as well, who's in that generation. A few others, and I think that England have got that generation coming through now, and I think there's players that you can look at. And also in that 2015 tournament, by the way, Harry Kane was there. There was a few others. So England also have had players from that 2015 tournament, although they went out in the group stages. John Stones was in that tournament. Kane came through, one or two others, not many. So it's always interesting when you look at youth tournaments and see who makes it. I mean, could name you Liam Moore, for example, at that tournament, Matt Targett. They've kind of Jake Forster-Kasky. They're not around anymore really on the England scene, are they? But Kane's still there. And when I look at England, I just see a good blend. I think they've got a good blend of youth and experience. I think they've got massive advantages. The tournament's basically made for them to win. They've got 5 out of 6 of their games at home, which is just incredible home advantage. I think it's unfair, in fact, to be honest, in what's supposed to be a neutral tournament. But I think COVID has kind of favoured England in that sense. The travel restrictions and such has meant that it's probably harder to sort of have a international tournament in the sense that it was meant from UEFA. So England had the most rest of any team after the group stages. They had a full week's rest, even based at home. They've got one game away now in Rome against Ukraine. Tournament favourites dropping like flies. So really, I mean, Germany weren't even allowed to train at Wembley's surface because of the rain. So even the weather's helping England in this tournament. So I mean, when everything starts coming together like that, you just start to think, is this their year? And I've got to give credit to Southgate. I know some people have criticised him, but no goals conceded so far. I think tactically he's got pretty much everything right. I will say I thought Germany were really poor, but the way this tournament's gone, I mean, England haven't had to play a really, really difficult team. But then again, when you look at it, they've beaten Croatia, they've beaten Czech Republic, who knocked out Netherlands quite comfortably, and now they've beaten Germany. So, Ukraine have now had to go to extra time. They've got injuries. I mean, Danielson's probably broken one of their players' legs, so that's one player down. That everything just seems to be going England's way at the moment. And so I really do think they are the tournament favourites at this stage. The only other team I could see maybe are Spain and Italy, potentially. Belgium possibly, but I think their injuries are going to catch up with them. De Bruyne just keeps seeming to get injured every time he plays at the moment. Hazard is almost permanent injured. So I just think that everything's falling into England's favour. So yeah, I'm gonna go England.
I can't really argue with your logic here, to be honest. It's just you look at everything. England do seem quite a very fit squad as well, and that if you get to the final, someone like Italy, Spain might have really tired themselves out as well by the time they get to a final. So yeah, there's no excuses now, is there, for England to not reach a final? And anything can happen in a one-off game, can't it? So why not? Why not?
How will you celebrate, Steve, when it comes home, when football comes home?
How would I celebrate?
Do you think? I mean, do you agree? Do you think it will happen?
I do. I do like what I've seen from Italy in the other side of the draw. I do. But when you got to get through Belgium and then potentially probably Spain, even Switzerland are no mugs, then they do have a harder route into the final, and it's going to take its toll, isn't it? And England, no disrespect to Ukraine, they should be able to do what England do and sort of nullify the strengths of the opposition's attack in this tournament and probably, I'm not saying scrape through like a 1-0 or 2-0, but just edge a match, do what they need to do. And then they're back at Wembley, aren't they? And if you're back at Wembley, then really the crowd can give you a massive edge. Even if you say Denmark, you've got the wind behind their sails, and then the final as well. So your logic is correct. And, I don't think England are anywhere near as good a watch as they were at, say, the World Cup 2018. But, Southgate seems to have a plan. And, you can't knock him at the minute until, if you lose this way, then he's going to get absolutely slaughtered, isn't he? But the minute he's winning this way.
Yeah, nice. It's looking interesting, but let's move on to Allsvenskan. We've got a few more minutes.
Allsvenskan. Tell us what's been going on in the league. Oh, there hasn't been any matches after, of course. But...
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what's been going on in the league. Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely not at all.
Been a season break, obviously, for the Euros, but we are back this week. So good timing for Sweden, I suppose, going out. But yeah, there's a handful of. There has been friendlies and things like that going on. There has also been some transfers, managerial changes. So a fair amount has happened. And I don't think we even talked about the Swedish Cup final, which was won by Hammarby in the end. So I think we briefly maybe touched on it, but yeah, there has been a few things happening. But yeah, the action returns properly this weekend. So yeah, things will sort of slowly get back to normal. And you'll be pleased to know, Steve, it's been announced there'll be 3,000 fans allowed at games. So we will have some noise at these matches from July the 1st. So it's exciting times really. And, the league kind of stopped because, like I say, because of the Euros, haven't had a game since May. That was the last round. So we've got a lot to catch up on really. But this weekend, we've got Norrköping against Malmo and Degerfors Ostersund starts things on Saturday. Sunday we've got some big games, BK Häcken AIK, Häcken with their new manager, of course, and also a couple of other managerial changes. Hammarby have got a new manager. EFK will have a new manager as well. So yeah, it's all kicking off again, and we'll be covering it as always on the Nordic Football Podcast.
Yeah, obviously congratulations there to Hammarby for winning the Swedish Cup. They'll be in Europe for that. Stockholm is green for now, right? So, really massive congrats. And, we've got a full round here of games on the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th of July. I will just run through the card, actually. Norrköping, Malmo, Degerfors, Östersund, Häcken, AIK, Varberg, Kalmar, Hammarby, Halmstad, Sirius, Mjällby, Djurgården, Örebro, and IFK Göteborg, Elfsborg. So a couple of new managers, like you did mention there. Hammarby have got a new one. They've won the Swedish Cup and they've got a new manager. Is that right? And, of course, Mikael Stara has come into IFK Gothenburg. Yeah,
well, it's you're right. Stockholm is green for now. And I know you'll be happy with that, Steve. I know you've got a bit of a soft spot for Hammarby. And, they're not a massively successful club historically, to be honest. Hammarby said this was a really big deal for them. The 8th in the league so far this season after 8 games played, and the sort of team who never really achieved, considering the fan base they have, if you know what I mean. They're nowhere near as successful as their local rivals Djurgården and AIK. Although they have the derbies against them, when it comes to honours, they're nowhere near it. They've won the league once in their history in 2001, and this cup win was the first ever cup in their history. Can you believe that, Steve? So it was a real big deal for them. They won it on penalties. But some people say, "Oh, the cup isn't that much of a big deal." Try telling that to Hammarby fans. It also means they'll be in Europe. But what's happened here has transpired is they've got rid of the manager, Stefan Billborn. I think I said to you on the last show when we talked about Allsvenskan, I said that I'm never quite convinced by Hammarby. Really, I always think they should be doing better. And I think that feeling has just kind of been hammered home, really, amongst the board's hierarchy and that kind of thing. And Billborn, although he's good at building and attacking setup, he's never really been great, without me wanting to criticise it too much, at the defensive side of the game. And I think it's just caught up with him in the end, really. I think they've kind of got a bit fed up with it. I mean, 13 goals conceded. That's more than Häcken, who are bottom of the league. So they've scored 14, conceded 13. They're sort of 8th in the league. But I just think ambitions are kind of a bit higher than that. So Billborn's had quite a while. to try and work his magic. It hasn't happened for them, and so he's been replaced. The new manager is a fellow called Milos Milojevic. He's taken a few sort of training games and things like that. They played Sirius in a training match and beat them 3-1 most recently. So the teams have been sort of playing some warm-up matches before the league starts. Akin Kumiamu is still there, by the way, and he played well. He was actually responsible for, I think, all the goals and assists. So he's looking good as usual. But Milojevic will come in, and I think the key thing for him will be to try and perhaps tighten up that defense, and whilst keeping the attack, firing on all cylinders. They've got a few players who have sort of, a few rumours about transfers and things like that. They've brought one or two back as well. I think Bjorn Paulsen might be coming back. I think he is back, in fact. So, exciting times for Hammarby, and we will see where it goes, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a bit harsh to me that he's gone after winning a cup, but maybe it was kind of like, you've got this cup final and that's it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like he was probably going to be gone anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, the cup made it a bit more complicated, but they decided in the end to
give him the final.
So it was probably the reverse of, like, for example, Mourinho when they got rid of him before a cup final, probably worrying that he might win it. Milojevic, who, for those who don't know him, he's 38 years old. He was formerly at Mjällby as a coach. So he's familiar with the league. He has quite a good reputation. And their sporting director, Hammarby, Jesper Jansson, said he's a coach with international experience. He knows a lot about Swedish football. He's clear in his leadership. He has a great game idea, and he has demands on the playing squad. So, there's a feeling that he kind of knows Swedish football, which will hold him in good stead. He's done well at Mjällby, as I say. He's been a coach there. So, good luck to him.
Yeah, and just briefly before we do finish, what is your opinion of Mikael Stahre coming into IFK Gothenburg?
Mikael Stahre, well, I've got to be honest, I'm underwhelmed at that appointment. IFK are a very strange club, in my opinion, at times. I just don't really know where they're going. They seem to always have a new kind of direction every sort of 6 months. There was always the original thing with Poya Asbaghi. He was one of the youngest managers in the league, and it was always about, oh, well, we're going for this sort of Spanish game model. We're going for this sort of tiki-taka style. Basically took all of Gis Sundsvall's coaches, and kind of tried to go down that route. They tried to go down the youth route of kind of like, we're going to bring players through our academy. Then they went and bought Marek Hamsik, Marcus Berg, brought back all their old players, basically. I just, now they obviously went, then they got rid of Poya Asbaghi, and they went, down the line with Nielsen. Now they've got rid of him. Stahre is one of those players, one of those managers who, I mean, he does have quite a good reputation, I suppose. But he's not exactly, I mean, you don't exactly.
Does he though? I mean, the thing is, I know he went he had a pretty good time at Häcken. And that for me, that's another alarm bell. Why would you appoint an ex-Häcken coach? They're big rivals, right? He went over to MLS and he got completely exposed at San Jose Earthquakes. They were absolutely terrible, an absolute joke of a side. Conceding goals left, right, and centre. It was like a different version of Stahre. He couldn't adapt. And he goes into Sarpsborg. He's not exactly failed there, but he, for me, has just sucked the life out of them. They went something like 11 games without a win. His final match, he did beat Tromsø, but underwhelming is a great word. I think he's far too much of a defensive coach.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know more about him than me, to a certain extent, because of the play. He's been in a lot of leagues that you follow closely, and EFK during this break, by the way, during the Euros, they've put out a statement apologising to their fans, admitting fully that they've been
hired the wrong manager. Yeah,
I mean, maybe they're getting their excuses in already, but the Hamsik experiment has ended kind of almost in failure. I mean, maybe not failure, but he essentially used the club to get fit for the Euros, and now he's gone to Turkey, to Trabzonspor. So all that fanfare was almost for nothing, really. Didn't really light the league up in the end. And that just sort of gives you a hint about the kind of feeling of short-termism. Hakan Mill, the club director, said, we at EFK have not been good enough in this situation. They're getting ready to welcome fans back, aren't they? And they want fans to buy tickets. So, they're putting out their statements and things like that to try and, mitigate the situation. But, they're currently 10th. Stara, like you say, is quite a defensive coach. They've got some good attacking players in that team, but, a lot of older players. I mean, one bit of bad news, sad news, I guess, as well for them is Jakob Johansson. You may remember him from Rennes as well at one point. He's retired in the last week at the age of 31. He's had a bad knee injury, several operations, and he decided to retire. So, we wish him well. It's a sad end to his career. But yeah, they do have players who are sort of approaching retirement age now, to be honest, EF Core. So, yeah, it's a strange one. We'll see how Stara does, but I just think that, as you say, he's a sort of a defensive coach. It's an easy one there because he's, he knows the Gothenburg area well. I guess we'll find out soon.
It doesn't make sense. You say they're trying to get people to buy tickets and they hire a known defensive coach. It suggests to me they're kind of worried about just kind of staying in the league again, because Stara he's probably a steady set of hands. There's nothing drastic is going to happen with him at the helm, but they've drawn 6 out of 8 games, and I think there's going to be a lot more draws because he's known for those matches at Endor Square. But he's an interesting figure, Stara. I would like to talk to him probably one day and get what his actual philosophy is really at times, what he's trying to achieve sometimes, because he's I've maybe been a bit harsh on him here, but I do worry for them in terms of their entertainment value, but also potentially results. But yeah, Mikkel Stara, a new IFK coach.
Get yourself down to Gothenburg, mate. I mean, you might be able to ask him yourself. I mean, they've had a few managers who have gone on to Norway in the end, haven't they? As well, they've had the Eliteserien manager who used to be at EFK as well. So yes, it's an interesting one. There has been some changes. I mean, we'll see where it goes. Like I say, the team is mixed between really, really old players. Vernbloom's 34th, going on 35. Players like that. As I say, Hamzik's left now, but Stig Thorsen in his 30s, Bjardsmere 35, and then you've got really young, sort of talented prospects like Alassane Youssouf and Jesper Torlinson, although he is probably leaving fairly soon now to Belgium. But it's a sort of a club caught in two minds, in my opinion. So we'll see where it goes. I predicted them to finish 6th, but I'd probably revise that now. I think you could maybe, unless Stara really gets his grip on this team, then I think you could maybe say they may end the league in about mid-table now.
Yeah, I think that seems quite logical, really, that will happen this season. But I think it's a good move for him. I think it was drying up a bit at Sarpsborg, and there was a bit of negativity starting to develop there. And it's a good move for Stara himself. I can see why he jumped at the opportunity. So we'll be keeping our eye on them, or maybe not, because like I said, I don't really like watching his games, but. Good luck to him nevertheless. And Allsvenskan does return. And what about transfers quickly? Is the window? When does the window open for Sweden? Do we know? Has anything happened recently?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll wrap up this show now. I think we've probably just gone over our limit. But one big bit of news I think I definitely want to talk about. I mean, before we talk about actual transfers, one minor piece of news. There's a lot of interest in Witry from Djurgården, which will pique the eye of fantasy fans because he's been doing really well and he's a really good right back. I'm surprised he hasn't gone yet, I'll be honest. At AIK, there's been some big news. Their sporting director, Bjorn Westrom, has left the club. He's been there for a long, long time. So that is kind of all change at AIK, behind closed doors. He's been at the team for 22 years. So, that's a sort of quite a major change, really. He's been there through their sort of title wins and things like that. He talked with his pride, really looking at the Swedish team and how many of those players have come through AIK. If you look at Isak, for example, you look at Christopher Olsen, players like that who Seb Larsson's at AIK right now. That was one of his sort of highlights. He said that he'll, when he watches that Sweden team, he feels proud. But on the pitch, there's one player I need to talk about to end this show, and I probably will talk about him again next week. But I've got to say goodbye to my man, Joseph Okumu.
Oh, no.
The big Kenyan.
No way.
He's left. It's sad. I thought we might be able to see him for a few more games. But as it is in Sweden, it's always fleeting. You've got to enjoy these players while you can, because you do know that if they do well, the time will come. And You want to guess where he's gone, Steve? What league he's gone
to? He's sadly not going to Ellen Road, is he? So, Belgium. It's got to be Belgium, right?
It is indeed Belgium.
You bastards of Belgium.
He's gone to Ghent. It is one of the biggest deals in Elfsborg's history. Club manager Stefan Andersen said he's signed a deal till 2025. Okumu's left a really nice tribute, actually, and it says a lot about him as a player. I think he's really loved at Elfsborg, actually. And sometimes you don't get players that well loved when they don't stay long, but I think he is really loved. He joined in 2019. He's grown into one of Allsvenskan's best centre backs by miles. I love watching him. We did a little video, didn't we, about him when he was linked with Rangers. But he said it's a fantastic feeling to be leaving, but also difficult. Elfsborg and Boras have been my home. I've really come to my senses here and enjoyed myself so much. I've got to know amazing people, but at the end of the day, football is a job, and sometimes there's a day when you move on. It's tough, but a good feeling for what comes next. So it's been good to be part of a fantastic team that was involved in taking the club back to top position in Allsvenskan and the return to Europe. And he's had a massive impact on Elfsborg. He really has. That like he says, that they're back in Europe. They had a really good season last year. They were a bit of a nothing club, weren't they? I mean, I know we joked about it, but for quite a few years they were quite boring, and nothing ever really happened. And then they've come along and finished second.
He changed it all, didn't he?
And he's a massive part of it. Honestly, he really was.
The big Kenyan,
his big sort of boot. His long. I'm going to miss his long passes up the field, booting it 50, 60 yards up play. He's if he carries on, I could see him ending up in the Premier League one day, because he's that kind of player where he's got a few levels to go up, in my opinion. So good luck to Joseph Okuma. I will miss him, actually. He's probably one of my top 5 favorite players to watch in this league. Not necessarily in terms of all-round quality, but I just love watching him. He's so unique, and I hope that hasn't coached out of him when he goes to Belgium. But really, really top draw player for Allsvenskan level. Too good for Allsvenskan in the end, really. And I will miss big Joseph Okuma. It's one less reason to watch Elfsborg, I guess.
Yeah. I'm really good to hear that as well, to be honest.
Yeah,
and
honestly, I was glad when I read it.
I kind of really want to see. I want to see Kenya at the African Nations Cup or something now.
Yeah,
just so
exactly.
So we can see some of him on the big screen. But some of them passes, them hoofing balls, like a deep line playmaker from centre back, isn't it? It was.
He's a gazelle. He's an absolute gazelle. I mean, Elfsborg have made 3.5 million euros out of the deal.
Oh, that's a good price.
It's good money. He's played 41 games in their yellow shirt. And Jimmy Tillin said Joseph came to Elfsborg after a careful scouting process. Don't forget they picked him up in, I think it was USL 2 in America. Right. So really good scouting. After an impressive effort to get Joseph to Elfsborg, he has been developed and trained with the right conditions. He is dedicated. He's worked very hard, and he is now ready for the next step in his career. So goodbye, Mr. Joseph Okuma. The Nordic Football Podcast salutes you. If we had a Hall of Fame, I think you would be a big contender. And let's hope to see you in a bigger league maybe in years to come. But I will be keeping an eye out for him again, because like I say, he's been one of my favourite players to watch in the last 2 years.
Well, what a note to finish the podcast on. Kind of a sad note, but also, a happy note for him personally, I suppose. But yeah, I think we're done, aren't we, for this episode now?
We're done indeed, and I hope that's given you a nice taster for the weeks to come. Obviously, we'll be back now that both leagues are running. We'll be continuing our coverage. Of course, you can also follow us on Patreon, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. Thank you to Chris, Stephen, Alex, Passett, Team Overs, Alexander, Charlotte, and Jurgen, if you're listening, for your support as always. And thank you to you as well, Steve. We're closing on that ton, mate. We're closing on the ton, and we'll be back hopefully next week for another episode. And if you want to listen to more from the Nordic Football Podcast, hopefully you enjoyed our episode with Ashley Coffey. Go back and listen to that. We've got a few other guests lined up in the weeks to come. Steve, I know you're doing your homework at this moment in time, your notepad, your book of contacts. So we'll be back soon, won't we?
Yeah, there was a question, I think, that was asked at me, which I've forgotten. I'll get back to that another time, or on the Twitter account itself. But I don't think there were too many. Next time we'll give you much more advance warning when we're doing an episode, so you can really get your questions in like a day in advance or something. Better that way.
Well, the question was about Fred Friday, but it's a Wednesday, so we'll answer that another time.
That was it. It was about Fred Friday, and I really want to talk about Fred Friday because some people kind of doubted him at the start of the season.
Yeah, we'll touch on him next week. So thanks a lot for your question. You know who you are there. So yeah, that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. You can follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. You can find myself on Twitter at JFFootball, JFFUTBL, and Steve at Meatman Soccer. That's about it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you again. Goodbye.
Take care, everyone, and goodbye.